Hello and welcome to Fantasy Football Scout, the SCOUTCAST ahead of Game Week 10. You may notice I'm not Andy. Andy's a little bit under the weather today, I believe. But as always, we still have Seb here. Hi, Seb. How's it going?
Hey, mate. Not bad, thank you. Not bad at all. Although I have just caught myself on the picture for the first time. And I'm like, oof, many haircuts, not just one, several haircuts all at once. How are you? I need your haircut.
I was going to say I can't
tips,
I can't really relate with this, Seb. But apart from having no hair, I'm good. I'm good. And I'm sorry I've cropped you a bit weird there. I will try and adjust it. We had a few technical difficulties because obviously you and Andy normally do all the technology here.
Yeah. So Andy, unfortunately, is ill with I didn't captain Salaritis, and so he's not with us tonight. So yeah, we had to transfer. Normally, behind the scenes for anyone who cares, which might be nobody. Normally, I kind of set up all the stream, all our tables and information and the content and stuff like that. Send it over to Andy, and then Andy does a wonderful job of presenting it. With Andy not being here tonight, we sent it over to yourself, Rich. But I don't think I set it up in a way that was helpful to you. So apologies for that. So we've just had to swing it around and redo some stuff.
I think it was user error on my part, but I was thinking about that. You mentioned Salah and you mentioned the hair. I mean, maybe you could not cut your hair again until Salah blanks.
Do
you have any important meetings or anything?
My personal appearance. I mean, to be fair, based on my hair and beard situation at the moment, I clearly don't care too much about personal appearance. Yeah, we'll see, my friend. Depends when he next doesn't score. He's doing well at the moment, isn't he? Although, is it like there's 2 goals in 2 weeks, 2 penalties, and then one? So 2 weeks ago, I forget. I remember thinking the other goal was slightly fortunate as well, and then obviously the one yesterday, 2 days ago, was just a 97th minute counter attack. I mean, Darwin got the assist, and I benched him, but a little bit jammy, right? One of those, Salah scoring goals isn't jammy, but to get 4 in those 2 weeks, just as people get on in him, captain him, it's a big old swing.
Well, yeah, especially when you take into account, I mean, there's a few things really. I mean, remember last season, Liverpool couldn't buy a penalty. Salah could not outscore Haaland. I got stung that time and this time as well. So that's mildly annoying. And then there's been all these red cards. And I guess the last couple of weeks, that's kind of favoured the Salah captain.
Of course, yeah.
If of course you captain Son, for example.
Yeah, and I mean, Son's playing tonight, so we'll see. I mean, there's definitely a world where Son could still have been the higher scoring captaincy option this week. Yeah, it's unlikely, but it could definitely still happen. But yeah, I think because it was a Tottenham red card, wasn't it, 2 weeks ago? And Spurs had some good chances early on, sort of matched. Oh, Fulham nearly scored there. Matched Salah and Haaland and what have you for sort of early chances in terms of total XG, and then just went quiet, didn't they, because of the red card? So yeah, I think if you were Son captain, which I was last week, and then maybe a Haaland or Son this week, you've so far probably been a bit unfortunate.
What do you think about the narrative that Game Week 8's got very, very lucky? As in Game Week 8 wildcard, that is, not just Game Week 8, because I feel like there's been a lot of players that people may have sold, like Sterling, Mbeumo. Obviously, Trippier's continued to do well. I know you still have Trippier, but I think you're a rare example because you sold Haaland. Do you think it's been that big a swing?
I mean, it certainly felt a bit swingy, but I guess Mbeumo, Trippier, as you say there, even Bruno Fernandes, right? Got a couple of points. People could have sold. You probably feel lucky or unlucky based on who you then brought in. So there are definitely going to be people who sold Mbeumo and brought in, I don't know, Diaby. That's probably quite a sensible swap, actually, and are now quite down on points. But there'll be other people who sold Mbeumo, sure, but did it to get like a Salah, Son, Haaland, Trippier, Trent Alexander-Arnold, whatever team, and are up on points. So I think the word, we used it again a minute ago, didn't we? But swingy rather than lucky necessarily. It's felt like the wild card, we're only just nearly 2 weeks in to it. It felt like Game Week wildcard has gone about as well as it could have done, but that's mostly just because Haaland hasn't banged and the alternatives, well, I say the alternatives, Son hasn't so far, but Salah has. And, as long as you've had one of them and captained at least Salah once, I think you're looking good.
I was thinking of I was listening to Andy, Let's Talk FPL yesterday on his, I can't remember what it's called, but it's the end of the game week, like knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah.
And he talked about when he wildcarded in, I think it was Game Week 8, and he bought in I can't remember, it was like 2 Chelsea defenders. It was like Zuma and Thiago Silva. I can't remember who. And I remember getting very lucky because I wildcarded a week later and I got James and Chilwell. And it's the most luck I've ever had in FPL where they just, James got a 21 pointer, then he got a 12 pointer. Chilwell was returning every week. So there is some luck in timing it sometimes that you just can't control. Something could completely change. And that's why I quite like the idea of waiting.
Yeah. I mean, like you play the cards as best you can and then you hope that you get fortunate returns for it, right? The old variance word. So, you give yourself the highest chance of a good outcome and then you hope for an even better outcome than you deserve. I feel like game week 8, I saw some people saying that maybe more people wildcarded an 8 than would otherwise have done because of injuries. And that was maybe lucky or unlucky or whatever. I think maybe that's true, but I think this 8 to 10 window was basically, we talked about it for a while, right? Was the first popular opportunity to wildcard, with the second one maybe being somewhere 14 to 19-ish, which we can have a little chat about later as well.
Yeah.
And while, maybe more people went in 8 than would have gone in 10 because of injuries, it's still the same period. So I guess, a little bit of luck with timing, but it was people's plan, I think. I don't think anyone who was necessarily definitely holding out for later and setting up a team to wildcard later has been forced into wildcarding a game week 8, at least not in huge numbers. And then, of course, people who wildcard in 10 or what have you, there's the thing that you often say, well, look, I'll wildcard into a team, and people who wildcarded in 8 will go, oh, your team just looks like mine now, but I've already got 2 weeks of points. I think that's maybe a little more lucky, but you want game week 10 wildcarders to look like yours, right? I want, if you're going to wildcard this week, I want your team to look a lot like mine. Otherwise, I'm already out of date after only 2 weeks. My wildcard, needs refreshing. So I hope you've basically got my team, but with a little sprinkle of, things I can't quite get on top of, like maybe Brighton.
I mean, there'll definitely be at least one player who I'll have that you won't. And I think that's Erling Haaland. But should we get?
That's a fair shout. That's a fair shout.
Well, actually, maybe I won't have him. We'll see. But if we get into it, should we start with Andy's points first of all?
Yes.
I actually should have checked how many points he got because it's not on his screenshot.
I think give me 2 seconds.
I think it's like 60 odd, something like that. He's had another good week. So I mean, you've both smashed it since wildcard. We had Turner in goal, 1 point. He was obviously on 8 until quite late on. Cash, Pedro Porro is playing right now as we record, and then Dan Burn got a clean sheet. He's got Maddison and Son playing right now as well. Ward-Prowse with 2. I don't know what he's going to do with Ward-Prowse. You can't really sell with those fixtures, but do you want to keep? DRB 2 points, Salah 16, Alvarez with 9, and then Haaland captain 16. So he's on a green arrow, and he's got 3 Spurs playing right now. And we're 15 minutes in for those not watching live?
Yeah, for sure. I think I was just trying to find his team here. I think it was 71 points I had here for him.
I undersold him. Does that include the Son, Maddison and Porro?
Yeah, I think that's like 3 extra points there.
Yeah, and I think this week, his priority.
Looking at that team, I don't think that's Andy's team. I think he sent us. That looks like the com team to me, because they've got Ward-Prowse.
Oh, Gahey. Oh, we've just wasted 5 minutes of.
He has Bowen. Oh, that's cool. We've got we didn't have the com team later.
So we got the com team.
Yeah, nailed it.
I didn't think he had Ward-Prowse either.
Yes, I will go through. I will read out Andy's team for people.
This is a friendship test to see how much we listen to him. I failed. You realised eventually.
So Andy's team here for me is Turner. It's similar enough, right? Turner in goal, Pedro Porro, Dan Burn, who he played, and I did not, so fair play. Matty Cash at the back. He's got Bowen, who scored. A nice little bit of jam on that as well, a little deflection, but I think he was pretty high on Bowen and has returned nicely. Maddison playing at the moment. Salah vice captain. Gordon as well, who scored and could.
How did I forget that? Sorry, Andy.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a great pick for him, Gordon, I think, because he bought him injured as well, sat him on the bench and has played in this week. So a lovely move. Son playing as well now, like a couple of us. Watkins with 11 up front and Haaland captain up front with 16. And then the bench is pretty cheap. And I think this is, you get your Haaland, Salah, and not a terrible team out in your 11. And you have Areola, Mitchell, Taylor, and Archer on the bench.
Nice. Okay, and then for those watching, that team I went through before was the community team, which is doing very well as well. So we'll move on to my team. I'm not having a great week, but I'm still on a green arrow. I haven't got Salah, but I got a green arrow last week. I'm on a tiny green arrow right now. I mean, to be honest, I think once the Spurs game's done, it's going to be a red. It just depends how big it is. But I'm 700,000 now. if I can stay near the top million, I think that's okay. And then obviously I hope the wild card can perform a miracle. But again, I've got Turner in goal, like most people seem to. Trippier with 10, Walker with 2. Again, conceding quite late, Man City, which was irritating. And then I bought in Share for 1 week as my Robertson replacement, who got 7. To be honest, looking at the players I looked at, he did slightly better than Simicast. He got an extra point. He didn't do as well as Van Dijk or obviously Dalot as well. And we don't know what Porro's done. So, Share, I'm happy, 7 points there because I had no defenders, literally. Sterling with 2, got wrestled off of a penalty, which was annoying. Saka 5, and Bumo repaid the face with 14, almost matching Salah. Bruno Fernandes 7. Son's playing right now. Haaland captain and Morris with, 2.
Was he ever on the penalty?
Sterling? He wanted the penalty. That was clear to see. What I didn't get was he won the penalty against Burnley the other week.
Say again, sorry?
I was just saying, Sterling, he won the penalty last week.
Yeah.
And didn't fight Palmer to take it. That's probably when, if he wanted to take the penalty, that's the one he should have taken, the one he won.
Yeah.
And now Palmer scored 2 in 2. Surely he stays on pens.
That's true. That makes you think that Poch potentially has left it up to, say, those two, Enzo, because Enzo was involved in those, just as a maybe, senior, not in age, but in terms of status.
And he took the first penalty this season, didn't he, Enzo?
So maybe there's like a penalty group. But
I have a little WhatsApp group.
Imagine afterwards as well. Imagine if Palmer had missed. But yeah, I'd imagine with Palmer scoring, you'd think he now gets the next, right?
I can't see a world where he doesn't unless he's on the pitch, because I know he's new to the club, but the fact he scored 2 in 2, the penalty was incredible at the weekend as well, like really well taken penalty. So I don't see a world where Sterling can take it off him, unfortunately, but that might make, a move this week like Sterling to Palmer that little bit easier, if I go down that route. And yeah,
with the fixtures, do you think like Sterling to Palmer is that just to facilitate other stuff?
We haven't mentioned that I'm probably on Wildcard.
True.
I am on Wildcard. I don't know why I said I probably am. So if I wasn't Wildcarding, I would have kept Sterling this week. I quite like the fixture. And yeah, I wouldn't just do Sterling to Palmer for no reason. But I think on Wildcard, it's a good time to pivot because the fixtures are getting more tricky. I assumed Sterling was on penalties, which was a big reason. I went for him, for example. But yeah, that's my team, and the whole team's going to change. So we might as well move on to your week, and you've smashed it. And I'd also like to apologise that we couldn't go through Andy's team, because I've seen a couple of comments saying, "Shame we couldn't talk about it." We had a lot of difficulty setting up the screens. So,
and he's the thing as well. See if I can find his rank. So he's 1.3 million now, but obviously with Pedro Porro, Maddison, and Son to play.
Is it 1.2 million maybe?
Yeah, I don't see that going. Probably more, to be honest. Because was he 1.8 last time we chatted? I think those 3 players, if he gets a goal and an assist out of that, he could easily get close to top 1 million.
Yeah, and I think he was about 3 million before he wildcard, so he has absolutely smashed it. Gordon was a good pick as well. Bowen was.
It allowed him to have like Haaland, basically, didn't it?
Well, exactly. And talking of Haaland, here's your team, Seb, and you are absolutely flying. 225k you are, and you've still got 3 players playing right now.
It's like 1.89 something million. Then 900k, then at the moment 200k, but we'll see after tonight. I think similar to Andy, I've got Son, Maddison, and Porro, so probably hard to go down, but we'll see about that. Stranger things have happened. So I'll just grab my team here so I can go through it. I have in goal David Raya, bench Johnston for a massive 1 point profit there. When Palmer stepped up to take the penalty, I'm sure you were thinking, I wish Sterling had taken the penalty, but I was like, go on, David. Go on.
I didn't think of that. Although, are you worried he's going to be dropped after that performance?
Yes, probably, but I don't think worried. I've got Johnston. Like the plan was to have a goalkeeper that could both rotate with David Raya in terms of when I didn't want to play Raya, but also if Raya did get dropped, just have a goalkeeper that starts. So yeah, it would be an unfortunate way to eat some of my budget, but it wouldn't hurt the team too badly, I don't think. Trippier then at the back, which has gone very well. I think Trippier probably one of the players that a lot of Haaland teams couldn't necessarily have. You could, of course, but maybe sacrifice elsewhere. So nice little edge up there, of course. Although I was going to try and find this for tonight, but off the top of my head, it's something like 5 assists from under 1 XA, which is very silly. Like we know, XA and fantasy can be a little bit dodgy, but it's not like it's going to be over 4 dodgy. If
we go away from like expected stats though, after 12 minutes of the Newcastle game, he had 6 crosses.
Nice.
In Trippier. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. And I think maybe Palace picked up on what Trippier was doing and they slowed it down somewhat.
I think similar to Salah, right? It's just the sort of proximity of those returns. And Mbumo in those first couple of weeks, you over an X week period, you expect a certain number of returns. But when they all happen in a row, it feels very fortunate. But if Trippier now did nothing for 5 weeks, that would probably even out nicely in terms of what we expect.
I mean, I would love that because I bought him. He hadn't returned the whole season. Bought him. He's hauled every week. And now on a wild card, he's very hard to keep in because we've got Trent with incredible fixtures.
I think it makes sense, man. I think I've obviously had 2 weeks of really good returns, so I'm nicely up on that move. But if I was wildcarding now, sure, you could access Newcastle defence if you want, but the lovely, lovely fixtures are coming to an end. The fixtures are okay, and they're a good team. But if it means you can have Trent instead, or, have a Haaland and Salah and whatever team, I think it's a sensible one to consider. And I mean, I was very close to going Robertson over Trippier for a longer term hold. I'm obviously very pleased I didn't do that. Speaking of fortunate, speaking of fortunate defenders, my other defender, Dalot, there with his 1 in a season worldie. What you going to do? Fair enough. That's complete jam. I will take it. Pedro Porro playing at the moment as well. And Matty Cash, who I did choose to play over Dan Burn, which clearly was an error. I think when looking at it, I sort of forgot that Palace were missing Eze, basically. And Palace did produce over 1 XG in that match. Again, 1 match XG means nothing, but it probably means they could have expected to score a goal on another day. So I don't feel like it was a horrible call, but when looking at it, I was just sort of thinking, who's got the better chance of attacking returns? Went for Matty Cash, got that one slightly wrong, but Dalot's dug me out there. Bruno Fernandes in midfield, who I have actually now sold, but he finally got some points. Probably could have had some more points, story of his season so far. I wouldn't mind having him back in a couple of weeks, but there's a player I want next week that I've sold Bruno Fernandes for. And Mbumo finally got some points as well. I think when talking about the wildcard a couple of weeks ago, I remember saying I think it was Dalot and Mbumo who were the players I was least sure on. So nuts that they're the ones that return the points, which again just goes to show that,
just 25 points between them.
Yeah, exactly. So, other players I would have had over Mbumo, like a Bowen or a Diaby. I think Diaby had been fit. There was a very good chance I would have him over Mbumo. So I'm thankful there. But maintain that he's been pretty solid pick all season. Price, penalties, minutes, decent enough fixtures. It's been an easy pick. Now the question comes, if you're on wildcard, because of the fixtures turning, do you actually look elsewhere? So come to you for that in a bit. Salah captain, obviously that's where most of these points have come from, about a third of them. Son and Maddison, and then Watkins up top, who once again defies various numbers to return points, but I'm happy enough because I have them. And then my bench, which is relatively strong because no Haaland, so just need to work out the rotation. I benched Darwin for Matty Cash in the last minute when we knew Darwin wasn't starting. Obviously that's not worked out, but I will take, the certainty of knowing a player isn't starting. I will take that certainty every time over the uncertainty of, will he come on? Will he score? Will he not? Will Matty Cash score? Will Dan Burn keep a clean sheet? I think you have to grab onto any information that you know for sure and hold on to it. So I did, and I benched Darwin. And then Dan Burn and Archer, who's my facilitator, make up the rest of the team.
So did you have, before the Darwin news, did you have Cash first sub and then Burn? So you literally just put Cash in and...
Yeah, so actually, I originally had Darwin starting, Dan Burn first sub and Matty Cash. And my automatic move was to drop Darwin for Dan Burn. I think that was the move, quickly firing it through various things like friends and models. That was the move that people preferred. But like I said, I kind of went and looked away and I was like, I don't want to say chasing upside because I don't really think that's what I did. I think I made an error. But looking at stats so far this season, did I expect Newcastle to keep a clean sheet versus expecting Matty Cash to get an attacking return? That's kind of what I was looking at. Never. I know Palace set pieces haven't been great, but still unlikely that Dan Burn scores. So I wasn't worried about that. And I think basically looking at the numbers, I just forgot that Palace don't have their best player.
No.
So
and Elise's been out the whole season as well.
They're probably their 2 best attacking players.
Yeah, me and Praz were looking at the Palace attack, inverted commas, on the Thursday episode. And that's why I ended up buying share, because 11.5's model had Newcastle favourites for clean sheet. And you look at Palace's attack. I understand it. I mean, benching, I don't own Cash. And I mean, it's quite scary not owning them. I mean, it wasn't, if you watch the game yesterday, but normally it can be quite scary.
He's so advanced. Like you say, I think he basically had like 2 crosses that didn't meet anyone yesterday. But he's a right winger. When they're attacking, he's a proper right winger.
Well, exactly. And I guess we don't always know before the game. So there's kind of, it's not really a gamble, is it? Because he's going to start at the moment. I guess it's just we don't know exactly where he's going to start. But we've had this with a few players
as well, though. To be fair,
I think
there's an interesting, a bit like the Chilwell one. If you're going to be more attacking, maybe you're also more liable to be rotated out during a match.
God, all that time we wasted on Chilwell, and now he's just not relevant at all.
Chelsea's time will come, man. Is it?
I think it's begun.
Off the top of my head,
the
is it
fixtures
like game
haven't
week
begun.
16? I think is it game week 16? They have gorgeous fixtures.
Yes,
and Kunku I think that's the earliest he could be back. So a Reece James, who will never be fit again, but I will go there. A Reece James, a Ben Chilwell, and an Nkunku team around about 16. Maybe a wildcarding then could look really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm jealous of people holding a wild card, but we'll get to wildcard chat in a minute. Actually, what do you want to do first, Seb? It's your call.
What we got? Fixtures and wildcard?
We've got fixtures as the next slide.
I think, should we quickly look at fixtures? Because I think it helps explain why wildcard now versus 19.
Okay, so we've got on the screen, we've got the Fantasy Football Scout ticker. This is the expanded one you can get in the members area. And at the moment, if you go in the description on YouTube, there's 30% off the members area. And I forgot to say earlier, Andy's much better at this than me, to like and subscribe and all that stuff. So we've got, this is game week 10 to 19. So it includes the blank for Brentford and Man City. It doesn't include any potential double, which has not been confirmed for them as well. So top, I mean, it's a long horizon, isn't it? So I guess I've got a bit less weight into sorting, by best to worst, but Newcastle are right at the top. Although it looks like their best fixtures are really towards the end, aren't they? Like 17, 18, 19, Fulham, Luton, Forest.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's an interesting question, like you said, over holding Newcastle or not for this upcoming period. And I mean, again, I'll leave that to your wildcard, to your decision over whether you want to hold them over that period or not. And I think Brighton, obviously, right at the top there. Liverpool, Arsenal, especially now after a little fixture shift again, I think make a lot of sense. Brighton look absolutely lovely. I think there's probably maybe 1, 2 Chelsea away, Brentford. Slightly tougher ones up until about 17.
Brentford's at home, so I quite like that still. I mean, look what Trippier did against, that was Brentford at home, wasn't it? When people were umming and ahhing, is it too early for Trippier?
Yeah, that's a fair shout. And then, so I think the interesting part here, obviously we've ordered, I think by difficulty here, which worth noting as well with that blank in 18 pushes City and Brentford right down, as you mentioned. If you can in the members area, you can delete that column, and City and Brentford, I think City jumped to second or something, especially once they get past that Chelsea, Liverpool, Tottenham little period. So of course we want to look at City again soon enough. But I think the question then is whether you wildcard this week, game week 10, like you, or whether I think 19 might make some sense. The other option, of course, could be say 17 or maybe 18 actually, I guess, with the City Brentford blank. But I think what you do if you're holding a wild card is you effectively dead end into that, getting rid of various City assets or what have you, and then wildcard back out of it so that you can have your full complement of team going forward again. And then so from 19, 20, 21, 22, I've got a slightly longer view here as well in front of me, which sees it up to 24. So a good 6 weeks after you would have wildcarded as well, which I think is a nice time horizon. City, always good. Actually, Brentford look very good again after their blank. Brighton still up there as well. And I think Manchester United around about that period, maybe start coming back into our thoughts again as well. So maybe some differences you could have in your team there. I think the main thing though is that you in game week 8, game week 10, we are leaving it a good 20 weeks maybe until we can wildcard again, because it's probably going to be for those doubles, which off the top of my head were 31, 32-ish, I think usually. So anyone wildcarding in game week 19, they've got to survive a bit longer here, but they do get to adjust their squad and have less time between that big overhaul and the next time they get to massively overhaul their team ahead of those doubles. Yeah,
what do you think of Tottenham? Because they're one I guess a lot of it's going to be decided on literally what happens tonight. So I'm not actually watching the game right now. We're 33 minutes in, it's 0-0. I guess a lot of decisions on wildcard, rightly or wrongly, are going to be made depending on what happens tonight. Like if Porro scores a hat-trick, for example, probably going to see a lot more people keeping him. Same with Son, for example. And I mean, if Fulham win, 2-0, maybe there's going to be this mass exodus. You can almost excuse selling Son to get to Salah.
Yeah.
And they're middling here on the fixture ticker, aren't they? They're not awful fixtures, but they don't really have a good home game until, I guess, game week 15 is West Ham. I mean, it's not great, is it? It's not many captainable fixtures.
Yeah, I think when we were looking a couple of weeks ago at that captaincy thing which was put together very nicely, it was Son for these first few, and then it was very much Salah until you got Haaland back in about 16. Or I guess actually you could go earlier if you want to get that Bournemouth fixture in. I think the two main things with Tottenham. First one, you mentioned like if Porro scores a hat-trick tonight, yeah, you're definitely going to see more of him. But for me, you know what I'll say there, like that's sort of very much reacting to that outcome.
No, I knew you'd say that. Everyone knew you'd say that, Seb.
Yeah. If it makes sense to sell to Tottenham, it still makes sense. Just, take your points and run. That's great, right? If you get to keep those Porro points and then get rid of him, beautiful. Bit like you with Trippier. If you get to have all those points and then get rid of him, that's lovely because I'll still be holding Trippier. And I think, however, the other thing with Tottenham is I remember saying a few weeks ago, when everyone was very hot for Son and was moving Rashford, Bruno, Sterling, whoever they could to Son to get that nice fixture, Sheffield United, and then he blanked. And obviously myself, who didn't want to make that move and was advising against it, I felt very smug when he blanked against Sheffield United. And then, of course, he went and returned against both Arsenal and I forget who, but another tough fixture, which just goes to show, of course, that Son is a good player.
He just scored.
Has he actually?
Yeah.
Gorgeous. I think I'm going to have it here in a minute, but
sorry.
Yeah, he's no. I'm very happy to. I think it's a Richarlison assist if he puts this away. It is a nice finish. Of course, it is a Son Richarlison assist.
Timing of that.
Son obviously can score in basically any fixture, and of course, there's that theory that on the counter against better teams, does he actually get better chances? Well, at home against Fulham tonight, he just scored from outside the box. Good fixtures are good for any player. The better the fixture, the better the player's chances. But sure, maybe there are some players that you think, do I have to sell them? Like if you had, what's maybe a good example who we've had in teams recently? And Mbumo, maybe not so much because of penalties, but maybe Villa, right? If they end up in a period of fixtures that are quite horrible, Watkins, Diaby, Matty Cash, are we as excited about holding them as we would be as Son? And I think the answer is fairly obviously not. So maybe someone like Son is an okay hold. But then you alluded to this a moment ago, because of the price and the fact that it's him that allows you to get Salah if you don't, he is actually probably the one you have to sacrifice, and you maybe end up keeping Maddison if you have both of them.
I think there might be a lot of people with a lot of value tied up in like Maddison and Son as well, which I guess
it's a good shout. That
does make it a little bit harder to sell. I mean, I've got that with Trippier as well. So I guess it's also you take your money and run. I mean, Son, talking about Son, I mean, we would captain him probably in game week 18. I think we talked about that. I think that was last week we were talking about that. Because it's a blank game week for City and then Arsenal are playing Liverpool,
yep.
I think we will want Son in game week 18. And obviously if he continues to do well throughout the bad fixtures, not only is it bad for your rank, but I guess the price isn't going to come down. So you're not going to be able to sell, and then buy back cheaper. And I think we have to take that I have to take that into account on Wildcard, having that spot where you could start with like an Odegaard, for example, then move to Bruno Fernandes. I know people are laughing at that. And then you could move to, I
will support you, my friend. I will support you in your Bruno.
Bruno's not on my Wildcard, by the way. That was a horrific performance from United at the weekend.
It was tough, wasn't it?
Although I only saw the highlights.
They still created a few decent chances, I thought. Like, Rasmus, I mean, I need to pick Haaland soon enough, right? Because he must be about 3 or 4 XG now without a goal. That's perfect. That's prime Seb striker.
Was he Darwin with minutes?
Yeah, exactly, mate. Exactly. But I think on another day, classic football phrase, on another day. But he had some decent chances. I don't think Man United look particularly good, but we've discussed in the past, right? A team doesn't have to look particularly good for an asset to return, and we often have players from mid-table teams who the team is okay, but the players are good. Man United have just turned into a mid-table team. Maybe they have. Doesn't mean Rashford and Bruno Fernandes, for example, couldn't still return big points.
No. And someone said in the chat, which I do like, Watkins captain game week 18. The thing I'm thinking with Watkins, though, is on a wild card, for example, or, if you're using transfers, He's also, what's funny is he's the second most expensive striker in the game, I believe.
It's nuts.
And he's not, I feel like I need to double check that now, but he's not that expensive.
He's mid-8s, isn't he? I think.
Yeah, and he's the second most expensive striker in the game now that Kane's gone. But
looking at those fixtures, the thing with Watkins is 18, Sheffield United home, that's gorgeous. But before that, you have Man City home, Arsenal home, Brentford away, Sheffield United home, Man United home. Sure, then you have Burnley, Everton, Newcastle, Sheffield United. So maybe actually you'd want to get Watkins back in for that fixture if you were to sell him. But you have to hold him. There's Tottenham as well. You have to hold him through Tottenham away, Bournemouth away, lovely. But Man City at home, Arsenal at home, Brentford away to get a captainable fixture in Sheffield United. Now, while if you don't have spare transfers, holding Watkins is absolutely fine. But if you do, that's a very nice route to Haaland. I think in game week 14, game week 15, if you're, say, sacrificing a Son and doing Watkins up to Haaland, I think you might get more points that way.
Well, this was my thinking. I mean, I'm not going to go without Haaland, but I mean, I think I'm almost certainly going to have him on Wildcard. And then those first 3 fixtures are incredible. Luton at home, Forest away, Fulham at home. Then potentially you could look to downgrade him to free up a bit more money. Like you could maybe move to an Alvarez or anyone really. But then if you hold, I guess, for Spurs away, you then get the Bournemouth away fixture before, like you say, it gets really, really bad with City and Arsenal back to back. So I almost feel like Watkins, for me, I think if things don't crop up, I'm just going to have him for 3 weeks.
I think you do. So Watkins, City in 15. Obviously, that means City have Aston Villa. I think Watkins to Haaland in that week. Of course, that means Watkins will score against City.
And it means you don't have Haaland. So I guess...
Yeah. But Watkins to Haaland. So then Haaland has Villa away, Luton away, Crystal Palace home, blank, which I think, it's an all right bench, because then Everton away, Sheffield United at home. That's a very nice swing. All you have to do is survive Bournemouth in game week 11 without Haaland, and I think the other fixtures are basically fine. He could score 5 goals in that period, but it's the hardest fixtures he's going to have for a very long time. I think a Watkins to a Haaland move during that period is very nice. You then, just have the 18, which brings us back to Son as the captain there. But presumably you may have sold Son to be able to get this Haaland back in.
But that's why from the reverse thing, if you say you have Haaland, you can do Watkins to Alvarez. That frees up that little bit of money, which can then get you, I don't know, a Bowen or a Saka back up to Son. So it can work both ways, whether you've got Haaland or whether you've got Alvarez. That's why I do think Watkins, I think he's very short term. And I think we've talked about it a lot, haven't we? He lost the penalties, which again, it was incredible yesterday. He got 11 points, and I know he's bad at penalties, but let's assume he scores that. Then you've got an actual haul that, rivals someone like Salah.
Question for you. Yep. So as soon as Douglas Luiz scored his second goal yesterday, I looked up his numbers because I was like, this is going to be, because he's cheap. He's like low 5s, I think.
He's on set pieces and stuff as well, yeah.
Yeah, he was taking corners. Like he could be a decent little bandwagon for the midfield. Maybe, we only have 5 slots and there's a lot of midfielders we like. But let's say you need someone in that price range. I was wondering, is this going to be one of those, but he takes penalties and he scored a long shot. No, he's not actually an option because he's a defensive midfielder. But I looked up his numbers, only this season, of course.
Yep.
I think he's scraping about 0.4 XG per 90. Now, that, of course, includes the penalties. But
how many penalties? Is it 3 penalties?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So, it's a fair few penalties. But 0.4 is respectable, especially for like a 5.5 or whatever he is priced asset. So, while I probably wouldn't go there over Watkins, DRB, Cash, they are the obvious Villa triple, and there are other good midfielders as well in that price range. I don't hate it as much as I thought I was going to, and I think there'll be someone who saw Douglas Luiz on penalties, saw that, I don't know, he's got a long shot in him, saw Villa's fixtures, picked him 3 weeks ago, and is looking very, very smart.
Honestly, I think there's worse picks. I don't think I'm going to go there myself, but I even thought about you could go for. I mean, I quite like Chelsea's fixture this week at home to Brentford. So I probably will go for Palmer. But I suppose you could go for Douglas Luiz for the next 3 or 4. Yeah. And then maybe you could look at moving.
Much easier bet for Douglas Luiz as well. Like, I'm not saying he can't deputise for Watkins. But if you did want some Villa exposure, the penalty taker in minutes, I've just said how I like that on other players. A much easier bench is Douglas Luiz in the tougher fixtures.
Yeah. Budget Bruno Fernandes.
Nailed it.
It's funny actually if you think about it that way. If Villa and United
he's a DM versus an attacking mid, I guess, but you save 3 million for the privilege.
Well, exactly, and you've got those incredible fixtures with the we talked about it a lot. Villa are very good at home, very poor away, or not very poor, but quite poor away. And also Rob Jones makes a good point about the 4 yellow cards, actually. I did see someone mention that the other day. So
great spot. That's good
so
information. Thank you.
that's something, because I guess that would be annoying if he got booked against Luton and you've just come off a wild card, or I mean, I guess a lot of people are looking at enablers if they're going to do Son or Rashford up to Salah, for example. I still prefer Palmer.
Get Pedro for the same price, mate. Oh yeah. But I mean, Palmer's cheaper on penalties and actually more attacking, so it's just tougher fixtures, isn't it? As an enabler, he's a better enabler.
You mentioned Pedro there. I think we need to talk about him, because something else on wildcard, a lot of people are going to go Haaland and Watkins. I think that seems quite obvious.
Yeah.
Well, Haaland, Watkins, Archer seems quite obvious. But then João Pedro, who, I mean, I held a long time, but you're here and you held even longer than I did.
Yeah.
He's only 5.3 now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Actually, it might be 5.2. Yeah, I think it was 5.2. But
that's lovely.
He's dirt cheap. And obviously, when you look at Brighton's fixtures right at the top of the ticker, I mean, they're incredible until, game week 16, 17?
Yeah, they're nuts. I think the main thing with them is not, are they good or are their fixtures good? It's a bit of rotation. And you mentioned before we went live tonight that you were interested in their midweek lineup and the Welbeck injury, because that could be key for João Pedro's minutes.
Yeah, the only thing was I was looking at quotes from De Zerbi, and he said he listed a load of injured players, and then he said it sounded like Welbeck was possibly injured. So it doesn't sound like it's going to be very, very long term for him. And obviously, we both own Pedro. He started 2 Premier League games in a row now, but it was quite frustrating because he's always going to come on. Yeah. But then I think in those fixtures, I'd actually rather have a João Pedro with dodgy minutes than a Douglas Luiz.
I mean, coming off the bench with penalties is different to coming off the bench with not penalties, obviously.
No, of course.
But you know what I mean? Like, obviously, 20 minutes off the bench, sure, like Darwin got some points yesterday, but I was happy to sacrifice that because it's not enough minutes. But if Darwin had penalties at Liverpool, I think that is quite different. You know, there's a good chance a better chance you'll get returns there, of course. And I think I've profited from that once already, right? I think João Pedro came off the bench. It might have been game week 1 actually, and scored a penalty, which was very fortunate for me. I think it comes down to the lineups, because Mitoma, people are telling me, I think I had Andy telling me that the emphasis on the Mitoma, so I will trust Andy there. It's probably the best shout, even with minutes in midweek. I think you're probably looking for players who either you're happy to rotate yourself in your own team, or are as nailed as possible in a Brighton team. You know, as possible. I don't think we know much about that at the moment, but someone like Mitoma probably is, or at least is going to come on very early if he's benched.
Yeah, like the brace off the bench and stuff. Because I looked at Adringa, but his stats, I mean, it's a very small sample. His stats don't look that comparable. And then I feel like I'm almost in that situation where, I mean, maybe because it's a small sample, that his stats long term will become better and it'd be an incredible pick. But I think I prefer Palmer to him, despite, the incredible Brighton fixtures. It almost feels like coverage. And I know it's really cheap, but picking Bernardo Silva or something, because he, historically when he had good minutes, but then his stats weren't particularly great.
And it can be tough, can't it? Like, you see Brighton's fixtures and you think, I need to get involved in that.
Yeah.
But if you can't pick a player that's going to get those fixtures, you don't get those fixtures. So I think it can be tough. And the defense, like Estupiñán was very, very popular before, obviously less so now for good reason. If he isn't sure of minutes, I quite like that. And I think these fixtures look very good from a defensive point of view as well. Like Brighton, obviously very good going forward, and have been worse at the back so far this season. Last season were very good, maybe slight change in approach, and they've obviously lost a big player in Colwill, if not other players as well, in terms of contributing to their defensive phase. But Fulham home, Everton away, Sheffield United home, Nottingham Forest away, hey, even Chelsea away, Brentford home, Burnley home. Those are probably a collection of the lowest XG teams in the league, give or take.
Sorry, I was a bit distracted there, Seb.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
What distracted you, my friend?
I was just checking the stream was working okay. I'm not used to hosting. We need Andy.
Can you imagine? Like, do it all again. But yeah, so I think for me, Brighton are a very nice luxury for game week 10. But you're probably making that call at the weekend, and I think you're probably having to play a bit of a squad game with them. So if you were still going Haalandless, I think Brighton are a lot more attractive, because you can probably fit other players into your team that you can be sure of for the minutes. And I think that's a nice segue to looking at your wildcard team.
Yeah, I'll go to it in just 1 second. I just wanted to make a point actually there. When you said about obviously Brighton, I think there's part of me feeling like I need to really take advantage of all the fixtures, to make up for, not wildcard in an 8, for example. And then I start wanting to pile in on loads of Brighton players. But like you say, if the minutes are a bit dodgy, they're not good picks, and there's a lot of good picks around. The only thing I was thinking on João Pedro was because I'm going to probably go with Palmer, and maybe this is a good time to put my possible wildcard team up. Because I'm going to go with Palmer, I was thinking of having João Pedro as well, having like a front 8, and then trying to predict when João Pedro will play. The problem there is De Zerbi gives nothing away. We don't have any reliable early news for Brighton, and the predictors, bless them, it's impossible to predict. Every time they said Pedro would start, he didn't, and vice versa. And I don't think anything's changed there. But there was that frustration because McBurney took a penalty for Sheffield United. It made me think Archer's not actually that exciting. He is literally a 2-pointer, unless Pickford's going to help him with an own goal off his back. But so my team's on screen now. I've got a few different variations, and they're all quite similar. So I think Haaland, Watkins and Archer, that's an almost guaranteed front line. It's just whether I decide to put João Pedro in. And Bumo, obviously his fixtures aren't great, but I'm going to want him back pretty quickly. So I think I'm going to keep him. Palmer just feels like an incredible enabler. Salah, that's the whole reason. The whole reason I've wildcarded. Saka, I already owned. I know it shows on the screen that I've bought him in, but I'd actually sold him I've actually sold him because I wanted to get the Bowen price rise.
Yeah, did Saka drop as well?
Saka was just what I bought him for, 8.5.
Oh, okay. I think he might have dropped, but if you didn't get that because obviously you didn't gain a 0.1 in the first place.
No, I mean, I've lost a lot of money. I tried to, just for an experiment, put together Andy's team on Saturday.
Yeah.
And I was 1.4 million short.
1.4 million?
Well,
how?
To be fair, there's a lot of players who, Praz made a point, when he sells them, he's probably going to lose about 500,000. But it's players like, Matty Cash, what's he gone up? Like 0.4, 0.5? Watkins.
Oh, right. So, yeah, it's obviously like
Watkins has shot up.
Versus,
I lost 0.2 on Rico. I lost 0.2 on Pedro. I'd lost a little bit on Pickford. And a lot of my rises, I haven't yet got, a double rise. The only real player I've gained on is Trippier. So, yeah, my team value is horrific. But, yeah, so that's my front 3. Saka and Matoma, potentially. Obviously, there's other players to consider. I will have to consider Son. It's basically Son or Trent. And there is also the option of not going for Trent. If I went for, say, like an Odegaard instead of Matoma, I can then do Odegaard to Bruno Fernandes. And then Bruno Fernandes can easily become Son well ahead of game week 18 when he's probably the best captain option. Defenders, I'm struggling. There's not many good cheap ones. I can't afford cash. So I'm going to have Tsimikas, Trent, and then Gabriel, and then Zinchenko. Zinchenko's the one. I'm not going to go for Zinchenko because he was subbed early, but I'm just trying to find a good cheap defender. I mean, it doesn't sound like Botman's going to be back for a while, so maybe Burn. It's not the most inspiring wildcard in the world, but I don't really think there's many routes I can go down that would make it more exciting. What do you think?
I mean, I like it, but I think your defense is fair, right? There's kind of a lot of middling price defenders who, interestingly, our defenses are really different just 2 weeks apart. So I've got Trippier, Burn, Cash, Dalot. I think Dalot would go quite soon for me anyway, of course, and some fortunate points. Dalot to Tsimikas seems an absolute gift for me there. Although I like Soufal as well. There's no West Ham here, which I'd be tempted by maybe. I think, if I recall, when I was looking at mine, Soufal was one of the ways to fund, I forget who it was, someone to Saka. Maybe like an Mbumo to Saka with some other moves or something. Trippier down to Soufal and Mbumo up to Saka, maybe, or Maddison was something I'd looked at. So I'd be tempted to have a look at that. But I think the main thing, right, is Haaland. Are there accommodations made for Haaland here? And we've had 2 fixtures since I went Haalandless. One of those being Arsenal, one being Brighton yesterday on Saturday. It's now Bournemouth and 11. Is that the main reason you want to keep Haaland? Because I think the rest of the fixtures being tough, still maintains.
So let's say I didn't go for Trent. Let's say Trent comes down and I can easily keep Son. I don't really see what I could buy that would make selling Haaland worthwhile, because obviously I'm going to be nearer to the point where I need to buy him back as well, much nearer than you were. So I can't really see what I'd be missing out on. I mean, maybe the Man United midfielders, which I don't think many people are going to agree we're missing out on them. I mean, I think it would mainly be depth, or I could go for Trent and Trippier, something like that. But then SCOUTCAST seems like a gift. I think there's some risk there, but he does seem like a gift.
Oh, yeah, I think on Wildcard you've got to, right? And if it goes wrong, you just bench him. It's easy bench.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, there are a few risky defenders here, actually, because, I mean, Zinchenko, we mentioned he got subbed at half-time. I've never been that confident of his minutes. I owned him quite a lot last year, and his minutes were a bit... I mean, they're not really that predictable. I mean, Gabriel, we obviously saw what happened at the start of the season. That's why he's down to 4.7. There is a small risk. I think it's low, but there is a risk there. And SCOUTCAST has that risk as well. And Trent's very, very expensive. So, yeah, I think and I'm quite jealous of, I guess, you having Trippier. I mean, I could keep Trippier. I like, you don't really have the decision. You don't need to sell him. You can just hold on to him.
I mean, for me, it would just be to fund, like I say, like Trippier to Sufel, Maddison to Saka was one of the things I was looking at. I've now actually gone to Saka in a different way, but I may need to reverse it. And I think you were saying that, is it that Saka spot that might become like then a Bruno, then to someone else, which I think makes some good sense. No Son, obviously, and I guess that's because you were saying, the captaincy wouldn't go near him in the next few weeks, and so you're not too worried about that.
And it's Son against Trent as well.
As in, so you're picking for your team.
As in, yeah, I mean, Trent's obviously expensive. I could just do Matoma or Mbeumo up to Son if I downgrade Trent. So that's really the decision. But this is one of the things, actually. There's not many defenders I like. Which is funny because there was a lot of defenders I liked a while ago, but obviously with Man City having bad fixtures, maybe I could just hold on to Walker. I got him quite cheap, but it doesn't seem that great, even though he's only 5.3. He's still only 5.3, isn't he? And also I really want 3 Liverpool, and because I feel like I have to have Haaland and Watkins, I don't feel like I can go for Darwin yet. And I mean, it's quite easy to downgrade Trent if needed, and I can spread the money elsewhere. Watkins could become Darwin, but then I'd obviously need to sell a Liverpool player.
So I think, just looking as well at your team, Mbeumo, Chelsea away, West Ham home, Liverpool away, Arsenal home, which takes him up to 14. It is then Luton home, Brighton away, Sheffield United away, Aston Villa home, and then a blank, and some good fixtures after that. But for 4 weeks, I know you have probably a lot of value tied up there, but are you better grabbing a Jared Bowen or someone like that for that slot for the next few weeks and then going back to Mbeumo? I feel like wildcarding now over a 4-week period where Brentford probably have some of the better teams in the league, keeping that player makes sense long term, but maybe feels like, well, if you're wildcarding, shouldn't you be getting the most out of those 4 fixtures as opposed to keeping a player who is probably, penalties and minutes, but with those fixtures, probably towards the bottom of the midfielders I'd want in that price range at this time.
Maybe I'm quite scarred because I haven't been able to roll a transfer once this season. Over half my transfers I've used, on defender injuries. So I did think about that. Was exactly what I was thinking. Could I go Bowen over Mbeumo? And I mean, I still could, but it's first of all, it's more money. And then second of all, what if I just don't get the opportunity to bring him back in? Because I feel like there's quite high impact transfers I'm going to want to do. Like I said, I'm probably going to downgrade Watkins to get a little bit of money out. I'm definitely going to want Son back, 100% I'm going to want Son back. And looking at the defenders, there's definitely some risk there, like we talked about. So I just don't know if I'll ever have that transfer to go back to Mbeumo. And he's his minutes are much better than we thought. He's on penalties. He's taking set pieces, and he's so cheap. It's kind of perfect. And I prefer him to Matoma, for example, because of the minutes
in terms of
and the penalties.
To get back to him, December. Tony's back after Christmas, isn't he? No, he does still get penalties for a bit.
Unless he gets sold.
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing. At some point, we need to start thinking about Ivan Toney, both in terms of as an asset, whether he gets sold to another team, whether he stays. But if he stays, Mbeumo probably, almost certainly, does not have penalties anymore. And I think at that point, he's probably a decent sell. That doesn't line up with the fixtures, unfortunately. No, you would still get him for the good fixtures. But I think if you were wildcarding now and didn't already own Mbeumo, would you bring him in?
If I was wild and didn't own him, yeah, I probably would.
You would.
Like,
See, that's the thing I don't think. Because I know you're looking. I don't think I do.
You're looking at that for, but then, like you say, it goes straight into that fifth game is Luton at home. Yeah. Then it's Brighton away. Then it's Sheffield United. Yeah, then Villa at home. Then they blank. So I'll probably get to that Luton game and be like, oh, if I bring him in now, I'm gonna have to sell him. So then suddenly it becomes 3 transfers because I'm gonna have to 2. As in, I'll have to transfer him in, then I'll have to transfer him out, and then he's gonna have a double. Yeah. So, and that's another thing as well, because my original plan was to keep this wild card until the blank. I want to try and save as many transfers as possible because give it 2 or 3 weeks, there's going to be injuries, and then we're going to start thinking about how are we going to attack the blank without a wild card. There's going to be, I just know there's going to be so many Mondays we're talking about, what to do. And I've already looked at things like, if I have Haaland, Watkins, Archer, I do Watkins to Alvarez, then Archer can play against Villa in the blank, and I'll play like a 4-5-1. But obviously with that, I'd have to sell Mbumo, or I could play a 5-4-1. So I'm already thinking like really, really far ahead. And
do you think, because you mentioned there, like you wanted a wild card around the blank. And so now wildcarding now, you're almost trying to cling on to some of that. I want to take advantage of the blank. I wonder if like you need to throw yourself more into, what a silly thing to say about FPL, by the way, throw yourself into it, my friend, but throw yourself more into like this wildcard. Because if you're wildcarding with one eye on that blank, being aware of it makes sense, but it feels a bit like trying to have your cake and eat it. If you have now made the decision to wildcard this week, I guess you should treat it as if you'd never thought about the blank for a wildcard.
I mean, if I was I'm thinking about the blank because I will have to be, we'll all have to navigate it. All of us that were wildcard will have to navigate
it. Hoping it goes away.
And if I was properly thinking about it, I'd get Flecken in as my backup keeper.
I was just thinking actually.
Yeah. You'd have to have like Flecken and Areola, and from memory, Areola plays Man United in the blank because you couldn't go Flecken and Turner because if Turner gets dropped, you're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I was putting too many eggs in a basket, yeah, I'd have Flecken as well, but I'm not going to go that crazy because I mean it's one extra game for a goalkeeper. Many game like 10 game weeks away.
Yeah. So okay, so let's say you go with this team, or at least give or take, right? There are a few price points you could swap. What's the transfer plan for the next couple of weeks? So for me, that feels like the big thing. I've got 3 Spurs, you have 0 Spurs, for example. I have 2 Newcastle, you have 0 Newcastle. So I think we could end up diverging quite a lot in terms of who we have to sell, but we might end up on the same players. So what are you thinking for the next few weeks you might have to do transfer-wise with this team?
So I must admit, I sent you this one earlier. I haven't fully tested future transfers. There is another one that's very similar. So I don't have Trent. So I imagine cheaper. The defence is much more, 4.5s. That's Burns and stuff. Then I've got Odegaard in for Mbumo, or Odegaard's in for Palmer or Matoma, but Odegaard's there. Then I have him, so then I can move to Bruno Fernandes, or I could just stick with Odegaard. I'll make a decision. Then he can become Son. So it'll be a lot of, there'd be a spot basically that goes Odegaard, possibly Bruno, then Son's back in the team. So, but with this team, I don't have that many plans for transfers.
Yeah. If you could, so with that sort of hokey cokey example, if you could do, that was 3 transfers? If you could do that in 4 weeks, so there was like 1 spare transfer, well, for when inevitably something goes wrong, I really quite like that.
As in the Odegaard, Bruno, and then Son.
Odegaard, Bruno, Son.
Yep.
And I think would you hold Saka all the way through that?
I think as part of that as well. Sorry, Watkins goes down to Alvarez. That enables it. So it is. There is an extra transfer.
Then do Haaland to Alvarez, and you're fine, mate.
I'd have Haaland, Alvarez, Archer.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I think looks all right. But yeah,
I think Haaland and Alvarez on a wild card is absolutely fine. By the way, obviously I will fly the flag for no Haaland, and it's very easy to do that in a week when Salah's outscored him. But ask me again next week when he's absolutely smashed Man United, and we'll see. But I think Haaland Alvarez is an absolutely fine wild card front two. I almost wonder if you did want to go Haalandless again here, having Alvarez in that spot would make an awful lot of sense, because then there is some attacking coverage, and I don't mean we say not coverage isn't necessarily a thing. Alvarez is a good pick in his own right. Alvarez has that good fixture against Bournemouth. Maybe Man United is good, and then he is cheaper. He is easier to carry through the harder ones. And you then use that money. I guess basically it's that Mbumo and Palmer and Mitoma slot where you'd probably keep you'd probably keep Palmer just as a really cheap enabler, and you'd want him later. I guess you've got two players. You've got Mbeumo and Palmer, who you both want later. So maybe if I did go without Haaland, I'd go Haaland, Alvarez. I'd maybe see if I could squeeze Trippier in the back, which he's going to eat up at least a couple of, about 3 million odd. So maybe I've got a couple more to play with. I go, actually probably more than that, right? Because Alvarez is half Haaland's price. So yeah, another million on top of that, 3 more million odd. I can then do Mbeumo up to like a Fernandes or a Son just immediately now. And I've kind of saved from the, that transfer, those transfer moves you were talking about. I've saved those. But then, of course, the headache I've given myself is no Haaland. There is a very genuine conversation that I'm having with myself, which is another very silly thing to say. I'm full of nonsense tonight. Imagine just sat in the corner being like, sit down, Seb, sit down. We need to talk about Haaland. Get kicked out. But yeah, so I think with the Darwin to Alvarez transfer, which I could make, there is a world where I don't get Haaland back until about 16 or maybe even after the blank, like give or take. I think with what I was suggesting to you, you may also end up having to go down that route or performing a fair bit of surgery. But yeah, I think I prefer that sort of still able to access those midfielders, but with one fewer transfer plan, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really early in the week. I need to have a proper sit down. To be honest, I don't want to have too many transfers.
You sit down and have a conversation with yourself, my friend.
I will. I will have to have a conversation with myself.
We can both talk to ourselves just separately. And
I've got Tuesday in the diary for that little chat with myself. But yeah, I don't want to have too many transfers booked in because I guess what's happened so far this season, and I do feel like there's a lot of risk here and there. And I think that's another reason. Yeah, I do quite like Mbeumo, but I mean, he's one I need to properly think about. Because I saw Andy's team last week with Bowen, I do really like it. I look at West Ham's fixtures and I do get that little bit of fear, but there's kind of that Watkins element where he has lost penalties. I can just tell myself about anyone that they've lost penalties and then I don't fear them quite as much. And obviously he was quite fortunate yesterday.
Alvarez, mate, doesn't have penalties. Yeah,
no, I know. Well, that's why I've never owned Alvarez this season, because he doesn't have penalties. That's why I had Carlton Morris. The penalty king. Should we do your team, have a look at Andy's team, and then we'll finish up with over and under?
Sounds good to me, my friend.
Yeah. Okay, so on to your team, Seb.
Sure. Allow me just to pull it up in front here because the stream is a little bit behind. So I have for this week, I have David Raya in goal. I think the obvious pick over Johnston. Of course, if Raya gets dropped, unless he comes on for a minute or two, which would be a surprise, then Johnston would play for me, so that's fine. Trippier and Burn both playing this time, and Cash as well. I finally get all of my defenders in the team. Pedro Porro there as well. Captain Salah, Forest at home. Son has Palace away. If you have Haaland, Man United is a consideration because he's torn them apart in the past. But I think for my team, Salah is fairly obvious here, even with Saka with Sheffield United, which was my transfer. I did Bruno out, Saka in, because I require that 0.1. I might
could have
even
guessed
reverse
that.
it. There you go. Oh yeah.
When you said you sold Bruno, I knew who you'd bought.
Yeah,
I just didn't want to spoil it.
It makes a lot of sense.
I didn't even look at your team but I knew.
Yeah, minutes, penalties, FPL pedigree. That's the one. There is a world I think where I reverse it again because Luton for Man United soon enough. But for now, I'm happy with this team. And yeah, I did it early. Despite I've got 2 free transfers, so I can handle hopefully an injury in the week. And it was so far Fernandes hasn't gone down, but there was a 0.1 that I require if I'm going to try and pull off a Haaland plan. But I have a no Haaland plan as well. Maddison makes up the rest of the midfield. Then Darwin and Watkins both start up front. More confidence that Darwin will start this one. Obviously, if we get any news, I don't have as good of a bench this time. So I've got Johnston as mentioned, Mbeumo, Archer and Dalot. I would probably play Mbeumo over Darwin. I don't think the other two are really options, which sure, penalties, minutes, but not a great fixture. So I would like Darwin to turn up.
Local
derby.
derby.
Then the following week, there's a chance that Darwin goes to Alvarez, mostly because Bournemouth fear.
Oh, so you try and cover Haaland.
Yeah, I don't know if covering Haaland is the right way to think about it, because that very clearly will not cover a Haaland hat-trick if it happens. But Alvarez is a good fixture in his own right? I think, if I recall, Liverpool's fixture that week isn't... got Forest, Luton away. I'm talking nonsense. Liverpool have a great fixture. So maybe I'll hold him if it looks like he starts. But yeah, there's that option available for me.
I mean, the team looks good. I mean, obviously you've got no Haaland, so
yes,
you can have that luxury of being able to start Darwin or bench Darwin because you've got those extra funds. And I like the defenders. The defenders look fun. And it just reminded me, you called yourself on WhatsApp When Dallo scored, you called yourself, what was it, Seb Jack?
Seb
Jack.
Yeah, because you're the one with the defender goals, my friend.
And now it's you.
Yeah, a very jammy one as well. I did not play in for the worldie. I played in for the
fixture was there though. And actually, you mentioned, just to go on a really small tangent, you mentioned the difference between 8 and 10. And I suppose now Reguilon could be picked over Dallo, and you save like 0.5 million. He was one I looked at very, very, very briefly. And it was just because, like you said, there's that like Sheffield United game. So I think they rotate with Arsenal defenders quite well from memory.
Yeah, so I think if I was wildcarding now, I probably almost certainly wouldn't have Dallo. And I think like a Soufal, a Liverpool defender, which I don't have, a Tsimikas now, of course, is a lovely pick in that slot. Also Arsenal. I've got David Raya, which hopefully covers the Arsenal defence. Coverage being a thing I think you can do in defence, unless it's Trippier. But we'll see. If he gets dropped, then I don't have any Arsenal defence. Dallo to, say, a Gabriel could be available there as well.
Looking at your team, though, it's made me think I do definitely actually want a Newcastle defender, because they feel like players you can play in any game. I always think back to Newcastle Arsenal last year, where Newcastle wasted, they managed the game well, I'll say, as in the ball wasn't in play very often. And it feels like I'd happily play someone like Burn or Cher in any game, if I have to.
Like Burn or Cher is the price is decent, but I think it's a tougher one, because if you look at the fixtures, Wolves away looks lovely now, but then Arsenal at home, Bournemouth away looks nice. Chelsea at home, Man United at home, Everton away, Spurs away, taking us up into 17. When they then have Fulham, Luton, Forest, that's fine. Liverpool, City, Aston Villa, but that we've got into January, so don't worry about that. The prime Newcastle fixtures, which, to refresh us as well, were in reverse order: Palace, West Ham, Burnley, Sheffield United, Brentford, Brighton, after starting with Villa, City and Liverpool. Like, the good fixtures have kind of gone. There's a sprinkling of good fixture in there every now and again. And so I think the funny thing is, you would say, oh, well, Trippier's fine because, if they're going to get goals, there's a very good chance he's involved in terms of set pieces and whatnot. And sure, they still have a good defense and he's an absolute bonus magnet, but he's more expensive. So maybe I don't put that money into Trippier. Maybe I go cheaper. But if you go cheaper, a Burn or a Shah or Botman when he's back, I think you're basically hoping for defensive returns. So clean sheets, sure, a set piece goal every now and again. But those fixtures don't look massive for me for clean sheets. So while I think the double Newcastle defense against Wolves for me looks good, I think very quickly I'm going to find myself benching at least one of my Newcastle assets very often. So I'm not sure I'd be too keen to get them on wildcard. Like Trent over Trippier, I think makes a lot of sense.
So I think where I'd see it, I wouldn't see them as like a starter. I'd see it as almost like the perfect fourth defender would be. I mean, I wish Botman was fit. I'd much rather have Botman than Burn, but obviously we've got to play what we've got. So I'd have Burn, who's the same price. They're both 4.7. I do see him as quite a nice fourth defender. As in, I would trust him. If there was a mild injury with someone and I have to play, a fourth defender that week, I'd be more than happy playing a Newcastle defender. But you're right. I mean, there's no good home fixtures. Not for a long, long time. I think not until like the Everton game. I think Tottenham have just scored. But we'll go to Andy's. Oh, Andy's team's not there.
Oh, we haven't got Andy's team, but we didn't have his points anyway.
No, we didn't.
I don't think he sent it through.
Oh, sorry, Andy. That's Maddison.
Oh, it's Son to Maddison as well. That is a tough one for people who don't have Spurs.
Well, I've got Son. I don't have Maddison.
I think that takes me over 100 this week. That's very lucky.
Nice. All right, talking of 100, well, I guess we'll move to over or under. I'm sorry, Andy. It's like he had an incredible game week. He's ill. He's got Maddison and Son as well, hasn't he?
What we're doing is we're just demonstrating how much we need Andy as part of our trio, right?
Please come back, Andy.
We aren't even a twosome without Andy. Yeah, we're barely a fully functioning FPL manager.
How are we going to get through this bit without him? The over and under. So I guess we just go through them all. Should we go through them quickly? So because I guess we've
go for it.
Quite long. So
shall we alternate over? So you go first, my friend, and then let's alternate with who goes first.
So Palmer, 12.5 points. Also, just someone made a comment last week that Andy, how can someone get a half point? And I don't know if it was a very elaborate troll, but they seemed quite annoyed. So it's basically, I mean, if you say, is it going to be 12? You could have bang on 12. So 12.5 means you go over or under. So you have to say it's 13 or above or 11 or under.
It's what all the gambling sites do. Over 1.5 goals, things like that.
Not that Andy's
over
condoning
11.5
that,
corners. No, I mean, hey, don't do don't do gambling, please. But in terms of when, you're going for do I think something's over or under? It's the way you avoid a draw, going bang on effectively.
Has a doggy been sent off? Subbed off before 60 minutes?
Oh no, really?
Oh no, that's a shame.
Oh, that's so tough. That's so tough. I mean, so Fulham have looked all right I've not seen any numbers, but the bits I've seen, they've gone close a couple of times. So maybe that won't matter, but that is very tough for anyone who owns it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have Maddison, so feel sorry for me. That's my own fault. Anyway, Cole Palmer, 12.5. He's got Brentford at home, Spurs away, City at home. It's not easy, is it? I've got to go under.
Boy needs a penalty. And
yeah,
I think under.
He's got 3 chances at the penalty. But I'm going to go under and hope I'm wrong.
I mean, he's barely got 3 chances. City is one of them. He's got 2 chances at penalties. So then we have Odegaard, 15.5. Sheffield United at home, Newcastle away, Burnley home. Very kind. Be nice if he did have penalties, because that would make it nicer. You're obviously looking for those points in Sheffield United and Burnley. I think, so what? Keep a couple of clean sheets, so you get 6, 8 odd points. You get half those points just for turning up if you're Martin Odegaard. Get 1 return, 9 points. I think he can get over that. When I say 1 return, I guess that's a goal. So I think I'll go just over for Odegaard, but I guess I'm hoping it's actually Saka that gets over.
And I guess he's on like 40% chance of penalties as well.
Yeah.
So then we've got Gordon next, 13.5. Wolves away, Arsenal at home, Bournemouth away. I'm going to go... It's a shame their only good home fixture is that almost certain 0-0 against Arsenal.
Yeah.
I'm going to go over. I mean, Newcastle are scoring a lot of goals this season and he seems pretty nailed. So, yeah, I'm going to go over.
That's fair. I could see that. Douglas Luiz, home to Luton, away to Forest, home to Fulham, 13.5. So, yeah, banged a long shot, but that's not really a particularly... I was going to say a repeatable skill. Of course, it is a repeatable skill, but not in terms of predicting it for FPL. So you are relying on any set piece assists or penalty goals there. I'm going to say under, but it's a real tentative one. I'm basically just saying he doesn't get a penalty and therefore he just gets like 2-3-2.
Nice. And the next one, is that a Dringer? I think by the hair. I think it's a Dringer from the hair. But 11.5, one of the Brighton regens. But 11.5 points, Fulham at home, Everton away, Sheffield United at home. It's got to be over. It seems like March is injured. I don't know much about him. His stats don't look that good, but I mean, even if there's 1 clean sheet, that's 3, 4, 5, that's 7 points. Just needs an attacking return. And it's Fulham and Sheffield United at home. Yeah, easy over.
Nice.
Unless I've got the player completely wrong. I don't have much knowledge on a Dringer.
That's fair. I mean, to be fair, if Brighton are producing a new player every season, there's not much time to get Have you ever that game where you see footballers out of context? So we're so used to going, oh, that's a Liverpool player, therefore I've narrowed down who I think it is. Mm-hmm. And then, like, I don't know, you just recognize them in context of playing football for Liverpool. Have you ever seen that thing where it's like, who's this footballer? And they're just like out in the street in their normal clothes.
Well, like in Aldi.
Really famous footballers that absolutely gets me with. Like so much. Like there's like no pattern either. It's not like, oh, you only know Leeds players or you only know Premier League players. It's like, it's probably a Leeds player that I wouldn't recognise if they're just out shopping half of them. Maybe
that's probably true, actually. Yeah, you
it's
probably
nuts,
think
like the context we rely on for who they are.
So you think, do I recognise them? Did I used to work with them? And it's like Jonathan Woodgate in B&Q. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so finally then we have SCOUTCAST there. I think so came off, was it just after 60 at the weekend, which is obviously great if you own, but also slightly terrifying for the future. I think he's first choice. So you're going to get 3 starts, I think, there. Obviously, we'll see how any midweeks or anything go, but I think he's going to get 3 starts there. You would hate a halftime sub. It's certainly possible. It looked at the weekend like it was as much tactical in terms of trying to, deliver a result as it were, say, form, fitness, anything like that. So I think if you get 3 starts and you hopefully scrape 60 in them, you can clear 12.5 quite easily. But that's the real thing. You need him to get those starts. Like one benching, say next week against Forest, and then subbed off after 55 minutes against Brentford, and you're getting nowhere near 12.5.
He's one of those players that he could do it in one of those games.
True. Well, a couple of set pieces off Trent,
True.
which last time he was in the team, he was taking. Obviously, Robertson has taken a few. So if you get a couple of those, that'd be very nice.
Yeah. So if he's taking the Robertson corners that were left behind. So yeah, cool. Yeah, not the same without Andy, but I'm sure we can top them up, or someone will top them up for us. So I think that's it. Do we do anything else?
Questions from the chat, my friend?
We do questions. Should we do a couple?
We've gone a little while just with the two of us. Lots of rambling.
We have. We've done well. It is wildcard. It is wildcard week. Well, for me anyway.
Yeah, I hope it's been good. We did it. So thank you for everyone who's patient at the beginning as well. If you're listening on the podcast, hopefully you didn't know this was happening and I'm giving away the game, but we're a little late starting just for tech stuff and just trying to get this sorted without Andy. Shows how valuable Andy is. We don't like him. We just need him.
Yeah, who'd have known? Who'd have known that?
But yeah, if people would love to chuck any questions in the chat, we will try and grab a few of those before we finish.
This is where
how
we
you
don't.
Feeling about
this is where we don't get any.
Wildcard? Yeah, imagine. Like, where's Andy? Why is it not Andy? Why can't you stream properly? Okay, bye. Yeah, fair enough.
Do you know what? After last week, I was so glad that Diaby didn't score because I think I was quite jet lagged, wasn't I? And I think I was a bit harsh on him, a bit harsh on his minutes and stuff. And yeah, I mentioned it about 2 or 3 times. I was like, yeah, I didn't mean to slag him off that much.
To be fair, like, you know, we talk about FPL on a weekly basis. It's so coloured by like the last thing you said and how that went. So like, even if I try and be nice and balanced about Haaland, Salah, Son and all that, obviously my team has done well without Haaland and that's been great. But I think it's really important to remember that was like a pretty close call, right? I basically did it because there was some free spice available. Like it was some free risk.
Yeah.
I did not think that it was going to go so very well. And we're not finished yet. You know, Haaland, a couple of goals against United, 7 goals against Bournemouth, and it hasn't gone well. So, you know, you mentioned there, Diaby. It's so easy to just go, what was the last thing I said? And now I feel clever or I don't feel clever. I think it's really important to remember that it's a very long-term game of luck. And so we need to chill out about weekly wins and weekly losses.
True. All right. So let's do a question. So we've got animations, Saka and Simicast in for Maddison and a doggy. Is that worth it?
Yes. So brilliantly timed after what I've just said. But I'm now like, don't sell Maddison, he just scored. But yeah, I think like fixtures wise and players wise, that makes some really good sense.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree.
As long as that's for free. That's not a hit, right?
I'm assuming for free.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't do it for a hit. It probably could wait a week otherwise. Yeah, it looks good. And I guess it goes along with the same vein of saying, you know, selling Trippier now on a wild card might be the time to do it. Maybe it's the time to come off Spurs. We'll see. But it seems like the same players for Spurs keep scoring, which I guess has been the way for a while.
Keeping a little exposure to Spurs is all right. Like whether that's Son or Maddison. You know, Maddison makes more sense from the price point of view. Son makes more sense from the if they're going to score, there's a good chance it's Son. I think defense getting rid of that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it's basically just a case of there are better options. And if you have 3 of them like me, you probably can't get rid of all 3 just because of limited transfers. If you're wildcarding, yeah, you probably hope you can squeeze more points out of other players.
I guess it depends your value as well. Because I've got Son for like 9. I can't remember what it was. I can't remember how much I got him from. It's just over 9. I mean, Maddison's now 8.1. So let's say there's $1 million or just over $1 million difference.
Yeah.
Then I'd probably go Son. But anyway, let's do a couple more. How does Andy pick them so quickly? There's lots of good ones. I almost read a really inappropriate one about Dallo. I'm not going to read that. Oh, hold on. Son and Neto to Matoma and Saka, or Maddison and Neto to Matoma and Diaby.
Son and Neto to Matoma and Saka.
That's quite a confusing one, isn't it?
To Matoma and Diaby. Yeah, so basically Matoma in both and Neto out in both. So it's Son to Saka or Maddison to Diaby, right?
Yes.
Cool. Yes. Son to Saka.
Nice. All right, we'll do one more. So Mike Shaw, horse behaviourist. I've read that wrong. So Burn or cash for Arsenal Liverpool defence on a no Haaland team.
So was that burn or cash?
Yes. So burn or cash for Arsenal or Liverpool defence. So I suppose it's what's the priority? Would you go for like a Gabriel or would you go for a Simicast? But I guess this week it's got to be the Liverpool.
I mean, you mentioned Haaland there as well. So yeah, I think if that's to try and facilitate Haaland, Simicast is going to make that easier for you, right?
Yeah. And, as in look into the future.
Yeah, I think if I understood that question correctly, right? Because Haaland was in there. So
Okay.
I want a no Haaland team. So
he's on a no Haaland team.
Just reading this now.
So I guess,
Burn and Cash for Arsenal Liverpool defence. Yes. Cash is probably all right for another couple of weeks. So you could probably just do one of those. So Burn, I would say, to Arsenal Liverpool. Burn to SCOUTCAST probably makes more sense in terms of fixtures and the money you'll have available.
All right, I'm going to read one more because I think this is interesting for you as a Haaland hater. So should I get rid of Haaland and Morris to bring in Watkins and Alvarez?
See, that kind of feels... So you're trading a superior City asset. You're trying to get Morris to Watkins with that. Does that feel like just responding to the points that Watkins has just got? Sure, he's got some good fixtures in the next few, but can you maybe grab a Diaby instead and keep Haaland? I don't know if, as much as, I've wildcarded without Haaland, blah, 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 but I think your circumstance is different. I don't know if you want to jump to a no Haaland team effectively just to get Watkins.
No, see, I think I'd only look at selling Haaland as a Haaland owner if it was going to enable Salah and I wasn't on wildcard. I think that's the only way I'd even consider it. And even then, I wouldn't do it for a hit. Or I'd strongly consider not doing it for a hit. But I think we'll wrap up there, Seb. Cool. But thanks everyone for joining us. Remember to like, remember to subscribe. It's 30% off the members area in the description below. Hopefully Andy's better by next week. I think he's just pretending to be a little bit sick. Was it a sinus infection or something? Something vague.
Just showing Scout how valuable he is to our stream by forcing us to do it for a week. So
and making me host. Not even you.
He wants the big bucks, right? He's going for the big bucks.
Yes, he is. All right, Seb. Well, it's good talking to you, and I'm sure I'll be pestering you before deadline, which is on Friday, by the way.
Yes.
Which we must not forget.
Oh, hey, thank you so much. Thank you so much for hosting this as well, my friend. That is tough, a last minute thing to do.
Thank you for doing the screens. Very much. Apart from Andy's team, which I maybe just
I'm not convinced that isn't, he's not here. He can't defend himself. I think he sent me. Maybe I've copied the wrong one, but I think that's what he sent me. So we'll take that off stream. I'll beat up on.
If he wants his team here, he can turn up.
On that note, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.